As the world begins to quiet, and the gentle rhythm of your breath slows into a calm and steady pace, imagine yourself drifting across a vast and ancient land. A land that stretches farther than the eye can see, where mountains rise like silent guardians and rivers have carried stories for thousands of years. Tonight, we softly journey into the history of Asia. Not in haste, not with noise, but with a slow and peaceful unfolding, like pages of an old book turning themselves in the quiet of the night. Let your thoughts settle, let your body relax, and as you listen, imagine the world as it once was, long before the borders we know today, when Asia was not yet a collection of nations, but a wide and open expanse of lands, forests, deserts and valleys, where early human communities lived gently alongside nature. In those distant beginnings, there were no great empires yet, no towering cities, only scattered groups of people moving with the seasons, following rivers and learning the rhythms of the earth beneath their feet. Across the fertile plains of Mesopotamia, near the quiet flow of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, some of the earliest human settlements began to take shape. Life here moved slowly, guided by the rise and fall of water, by the warmth of the sun, and the need to grow food and build shelter. Further east, along the wide and winding Yellow River, early communities in what would one day become China began to plant seeds, shape tools, and form the first roots of a civilization that would gently grow over thousands of years. And in the vast lands of the Indian subcontinent, near the calm and life-giving Indus River, people built organized settlements, laying out streets, crafting goods, and quietly forming one of the earliest urban societies the world would ever know. Each of these places, though far apart, shared something deeply human, a desire to settle, to build, to belong. As time moved forward, slowly and almost imperceptibly, these scattered communities began to change. Villages became towns, towns began to take on structure, and with structure came the first signs of leadership, tradition, and shared identity. There was no rush in this transformation, no sudden rise, only a gradual shift, like the soft turning of seasons. Across the steppes of Central Asia, groups of nomadic people moved endlessly with their herds, guided by the open sky and the whispering winds. Their lives were not bound by walls, but by movement, and they carried with them stories, skills, and connections that would one day link distant parts of the continent together. In the forests, along rivers, across deserts, Asia was alive with quiet beginnings. Small fires lit under the night sky, voices speaking in early languages, hands shaping tools, pottery, and simple homes. And as generations passed, these simple beginnings began to form something deeper, something more connected, the idea of community, the early sense of culture, the first threads of what would slowly become identity. In some regions, spiritual beliefs began to emerge, gentle explanations of the world around them. The sun, the moon, the rivers, and the sky all held meaning. Life was understood not in terms of power, but in harmony, a quiet balance between people and the natural world. And so, without noise, without urgency, Asia began its long and steady journey, not as a place of sudden events, but as a land of slow becoming, a place where time itself seemed to move differently, stretching across centuries, shaping lives in ways that were soft, continuous, and deeply human. As you drift further into relaxation, imagine yourself walking through one of these early landscapes. The air is still, The earth is warm beneath your feet. In the distance, a small settlement rests beside a river, its people moving calmly through their day. Unaware of the vast future that will one day unfold from these quiet beginnings, there is no rush here, only time, only gentle change, only the beginning of a story that will stretch across thousands of years, a story of kingdoms yet to rise, of empires yet to form, of journeys, discoveries, and transformations that will slowly shape the modern world. But for now, we remain here, in the calm and distant past, where everything is just beginning. And as this peaceful moment settles around you, the story of Asia prepares to move forward, ever so slowly, into the formation of its earliest kingdoms, where identity, leadership, and tradition will begin to take clearer shape. As time continues its quiet and steady passage, those early settlements begin to change in subtle but meaningful ways. Like ripples spreading across still water, the small communities that once lived simply along rivers and open lands now begin to form stronger connections, not only with the earth beneath them, but with one another. Slowly, and almost without notice, the foundations of early kingdoms begin to take shape across different parts of Asia. In the lands between the Tigris and Euphrates, where the soil was rich and the rivers generous, villages grew into organized cities. Here, people began to build with intention, shaping walls, temples, and gathering spaces. Leadership emerged gently, often rooted in wisdom, experience, or spiritual belief. These early rulers were not yet distant or powerful figures, but rather guides of their communities, helping to organize daily life, resolve disputes, and maintain a sense of order. Further east, along the Yellow River, a similar transformation was unfolding. Small agricultural societies began to unite under shared traditions and customs. Over time, these connections deepened, forming the earliest dynastic structures in ancient China. Life here moved with a sense of rhythm and continuity, guided by cycles of nature, respect for ancestors, and a growing belief in harmony between heaven and earth. And in the Indian subcontinent, the quiet legacy of the Indus Valley began to evolve into new forms of society. As older cities faded, new cultural patterns emerged, shaped by migration, language, and early systems of belief that would one day influence vast populations. Across these regions, something profound was happening. Not quickly, not dramatically, but steadily. People were beginning to see themselves as part of something larger. A village became a region became a shared identity, and slowly the idea of a kingdom began to form. These early kingdoms were not defined by sharp borders or rigid control. Instead, they were fluid, shaped by geography, relationships, and the quiet influence of leadership. Rivers often marked their reach, mountains offered protection, and trade routes began to connect distant lands in gentle, expanding networks. Trade itself became a soft thread weaving these early societies together. Goods moved slowly across the land, grains, tools, textiles, but along with them traveled ideas, beliefs, and stories. Through this quiet exchange, cultures began to learn from one another, shaping a shared yet diverse foundation across Asia. In the vast steppes of Central Asia, nomadic groups continued their endless journeys. Though they didn't build kingdoms in the same way, their presence was deeply important. They connected distant worlds, carrying knowledge and influence across great distances, often without leaving a permanent mark on the land. And yet, Their role in this growing network of early civilizations was essential, like the wind that cannot be seen, but is always felt. As generations passed, traditions became stronger. Customs were repeated, remembered, and passed down. Early systems of law, belief, and governance began to take gentle form, not as strict rules, but as shared understandings that brought stability and continuity. Spiritual life deepened as well. In many regions, people looked beyond the physical world, seeking meaning in the unseen. Early philosophies and belief systems began to emerge, offering guidance, comfort, and a sense of purpose. These ideas would continue to grow quietly over centuries, shaping the identity of entire civilizations. And so, the land of Asia, once scattered with small and separate communities, began to feel more connected, more structured, more alive with identity. Kingdoms were forming, not with sudden power, but with slow intention. Each one carrying its own culture, its own rhythm, its own story, and yet all moving together, part of a much larger journey that stretched across the continent. As you continue to relax, imagine watching this transformation from afar. The rivers still flow gently. The lands remain vast and open. But now there are signs of something more, something growing quietly beneath the surface, a sense of belonging, a sense of order. The early beginnings of civilizations that will one day rise, expand, and shape the course of history. For now, everything remains calm. Everything continues at its own gentle pace. And as this peaceful evolution unfolds, the story begins to move toward a new chapter, where these early kingdoms will grow stronger, and their influence will begin to spread across the lands of Asia, slowly giving rise to something even greater. As the quiet rhythm of early kingdoms continues, something new begins to emerge across the vast lands of Asia, a gentle expansion of influence, a slow and steady rise of larger powers that begin to shape the regions around them. These are the early signs of empires, not formed in a single moment, nor driven by sudden force, but growing gradually as kingdoms extend their reach, strengthen their structures, and connect more deeply with the lands and people around them. In the western regions of Asia, near the ancient lands of Mesopotamia, some of the first true empires begin to take form. Here, rulers slowly expand beyond their original cities, bringing nearby lands under a shared system of governance. Roads are built, communication improves, and a sense of unity, though still delicate, begins to spread. These early empires do not rush. They expand carefully, step by step, shaped as much by cooperation as by control. Further east, across the wide and fertile lands of China, dynasties begin to rise with a quiet sense of continuity. Each dynasty builds upon the legacy of the last, strengthening systems of administration, refining cultural traditions, and nurturing a deep respect for order and harmony. Life within these growing realms remains calm and structured. Fields are tended, rivers are respected. Communities live within a larger system that feels steady, almost timeless. In the Indian subcontinent, powerful kingdoms begin to extend their influence as well. Over time, these regions see the emergence of larger political structures, where governance becomes more organized and cultural life begins to flourish in new and meaningful ways. Trade routes expand, linking distant regions together. Ideas begin to travel further than ever before. And with these connections comes a quiet blending of cultures, not replacing one another, but gently shaping each other over time. Across Central Asia, the open lands continue to be home to nomadic groups, but now their role becomes even more significant. As empires grow on either side, these travelers act as bridges, connecting east and west, carrying goods, knowledge, and stories across the vast distances. The land itself begins to feel more connected, not unified in a single sense, but woven together through movement, exchange, and shared experience. As empires slowly expand, they bring with them a sense of stability, but also quiet challenges. Maintaining harmony across wide lands requires patience, understanding, and a careful balance. Rulers begin to develop systems to manage distant regions, appointing leaders, organizing resources, and creating structures that allow life to continue peacefully. And even as borders extend, daily life for most people remains gentle and familiar. Farmers continue their work under the open sky. Artisans shape tools and crafts with steady hands. Families gather in the evenings, sharing stories that echo both the past and the quiet changes of the present. There is no sudden shift, no overwhelming transformation, only a slow deepening of complexity, a soft layering of history. And within these growing empires, culture begins to flourish in new ways. Writing systems become more refined. Philosophies take shape, offering ways to understand the world and one's place within it. Art, music, and storytelling become expressions of identity, carrying meaning across generations. These empires are not just structures of power. They are living, breathing worlds, shaped by countless individuals, each contributing to the quiet flow of time. And as you drift deeper into relaxation, imagine standing at the edge of one of these early empires. The landscape stretches far into the distance. Villages, towns, and cities are connected by simple roads. Caravans move slowly along these paths, carrying goods and quiet conversations between distant lands. There is a sense of calm movement, a feeling that the world is expanding, but gently, without urgency. The story of Asia continues to unfold, not in sudden leaps, but in long, flowing waves of change. And as these empires grow and settle into their rhythms, the next chapter begins to take shape. One that will bring us into the world of medieval Asia, where castles, traditions, and daily life continue to evolve in a slow and peaceful dance of time. As the gentle passage of time carries us forward, the growing empires of Asia begin to settle into a quieter, more structured rhythm, giving way to an age that feels both grounded and deeply rooted in tradition. This is a time where life unfolds slowly, where the patterns of daily existence become more defined, and where the lands of Asia are shaped not only by rulers and expansion, but by the steady presence of ordinary people living their lives in calm and familiar ways. Across many regions, this era brings the rise of fortified places, not always grand or imposing, but built with care and purpose. Walls of earth, stone, or wood begin to surround towns and centers of governance, offering protection, but also a sense of belonging. These are not places of constant conflict. They are places of routine, places where markets open with the morning light, where craftsmen quietly practice their skills, and where communities gather in shared spaces, guided by traditions that have slowly taken root over generations. In parts of East Asia, dynasties continue their steady rule, shaping societies with a focus on harmony, order, and continuity. Systems of governance become more refined, guided by philosophy and a deep respect for structure. scholars begin to play a gentle but important role, preserving knowledge, guiding leaders, and helping to maintain balance within society. Life here moves with intention. Each season brings its own rhythm. Each role within society carries its own quiet responsibility, and across the Indian subcontinent, a rich tapestry of cultures continues to unfold. Kingdoms rise and settle into patterns of governance that support both spiritual life and daily living. Temples, centers of learning, and gathering places become part of the landscape, not as symbols of power, but as places of reflection and connection. The flow of life remains steady, the days pass gently, and culture deepens, layer by layer. In the vast lands of the Middle East and Central Asia, the influence of earlier empires blends into new forms of organization. Trade routes continue to stretch across deserts and plains, bringing distant regions into quiet contact with one another. Caravans move slowly under wide skies, their journeys long but unhurried. They carry not only goods, but stories, languages, and traditions, each one adding to the shared fabric of life across Asia. And in the northern and central regions, nomadic communities continue their movement across open landscapes. Their way of life remains connected to the land and the changing seasons, free from walls, yet deeply tied to the rhythms of nature. They are not separate from this evolving world. They are part of it, a moving presence within a slowly stabilizing continent. As time flows onward, societies across Asia become more structured, but not rigid. Customs guide behavior, traditions shape identity, and a sense of continuity allows people to feel connected to both their past and their future. Even in moments of uncertainty, when borders shift or leadership changes, life continues with a calm resilience. Fields are still planted, families still gather, stories are still told beneath quiet skies. There is a softness to this age, a feeling that while the world is growing more complex, it is doing so gently, without losing its sense of calm. And within this peaceful progression, art and culture find new expressions. Architecture begins to reflect both function and beauty. Clothing, music, and language evolve, carrying the subtle marks of time. Philosophical thought deepens, offering ways to understand life purpose and the nature of existence itself. These are not changes that demand attention. They unfold quietly, becoming part of the world without disturbance. As you continue to relax, imagine walking through one of these medieval towns. The air is cool. The sound of distant conversation drifts softly. A craftsman works patiently at his bench, shaping something with care. Children move gently through the streets, their laughter light and unhurried. There is no sense of rush, only presence, only continuity, only the feeling of being part of something that is slowly, steadily unfolding. And as this calm era continues, the story begins to shift once more, toward a time when these settled worlds will experience subtle tensions, quiet power struggles that will reshape borders and influence, not with chaos, but with the same slow and steady movement that has guided Asia through the centuries. As the calm and steady rhythm of life continues across the lands of Asia, a quiet shift begins to take place. Subtle at first, almost unnoticeable, like a gentle change in the wind. The kingdoms and empires that had settled into patterns of order and tradition now begin to experience soft tensions beneath the surface. These are not sudden disruptions, nor loud and chaotic struggles, but gradual movements of power, influence, and change. Borders, once loosely defined by rivers, mountains, and shared understanding, begin to shift, not abruptly, but slowly, as rulers seek to extend their reach or protect what they already hold. In some regions, leadership passes from one generation to the next, sometimes smoothly, guided by tradition, and sometimes with quiet uncertainty, as different voices and visions emerge within the same realm. These moments do not break the calm. They simply reshape it. Across East Asia, dynasties continue their long-standing traditions, yet within their structured systems, small changes begin to unfold. New leaders bring slightly different perspectives. Adjustments are made to governance, and over time, these small shifts create a gradual transformation in how power is held and expressed. The balance between stability and change becomes a delicate one. And yet, life for most people continues with a familiar rhythm. The fields are still tended, the seasons still guide the days. Communities remain connected through shared customs and quiet understanding. In the Indian subcontinent, the landscape of kingdoms becomes more fluid. Regions rise in influence while others gently fade, creating a slow and continuous movement of authority across the land. These changes are not always marked by conflict. Often, they unfold through alliances, marriages, and evolving cultural ties. Power, in this sense, moves like a tide, advancing and retreating in its own time. Further west, in the Middle East, the legacy of earlier empires blends into new forms of governance. Here too, the shifting of influence is constant, yet rarely overwhelming. Trade routes continue to thrive, and cities remain centers of learning, exchange, and quiet growth. Even as rulers change, the deeper fabric of society remains intact. People adapt, they continue, they endure. Across the vast steppes of Central Asia, movement remains the way of life. Nomadic groups travel across open lands, but their interactions with settled kingdoms begin to carry new meaning. Sometimes they serve as connectors, sometimes as challengers, yet always as part of the broader story unfolding across the continent. Their presence adds a dynamic layer to this period, one that is fluid, ever-changing, yet still aligned with the gentle pace of time. As these quiet power shifts continue, the idea of identity begins to deepen within each region. Kingdoms are no longer just places of governance. They become symbols of culture, tradition, and belonging. People begin to feel more closely tied to the lands they inhabit, to the languages they speak, to the customs they follow. This sense of identity grows slowly, like roots spreading beneath the surface, and with it comes a greater awareness of difference, not in conflict but in contrast. Each region carries its own unique rhythm, its own way of life, its own quiet story, yet all remain part of the same vast and interconnected world. As you drift deeper into relaxation, imagine observing these lands from a distance. You see no sudden changes, no sharp divides, only a gentle shifting, like sand moving slowly under the touch of wind. A border adjusts here, a ruler changes there, a culture deepens, evolves, and continues. The world of Asia remains calm, even as it transforms, and through this peaceful evolution, the stage is slowly set for the next phase of its long journey, a time when these quiet shifts will begin to give way to larger events, where conflicts, though still told softly, will start to shape the direction of entire regions. But for now, everything remains balanced. Everything continues in its slow and steady flow, and the story moves gently forward as time continues its gentle and unbroken flow. the quiet shifts of power across Asia begin to gather into something slightly more defined. Not sudden, not overwhelming, but noticeable in the way distant lands begin to feel the effects of larger movements. This is a period where conflicts begin to shape the course of history. Yet even here they unfold slowly, like distant echoes rather than sharp disruptions. Across various regions, kingdoms and empires find themselves in moments of tension, sometimes over land, sometimes over influence, and sometimes simply as part of the natural rhythm of rising and falling power. These conflicts are not constant. They come and go, like passing storms that eventually give way to calm skies once more. In East Asia, dynasties that had long maintained balance begin to experience periods of challenge. New forces rise at the edges, neighboring regions grow stronger, and occasionally borders are tested. Yet even during these times, life within the heart of these societies remains steady. Scholars continue their work. Farmers tend to their fields. Families gather as they always have, grounded in traditions that remain unchanged despite the distant sounds of movement. In the Indian subcontinent, the shifting landscape of kingdoms begins to include moments of confrontation. But these too unfold with a sense of continuity rather than chaos. Rulers seek to protect their lands or expand gently outward. And while battles may occur, they do not define the entirety of life. Instead, they are woven into the broader tapestry of time, moments that pass, leaving behind subtle changes in the shape of regions and leadership. Further west, in the Middle East, the legacy of earlier empires continues to evolve. New powers emerge, building upon what came before, sometimes through cooperation, and at other times through quiet contest. Cities remain centers of culture and learning, even as leadership changes. Trade routes continue their slow movement, connecting lands that might otherwise feel distant from one another. Across Central Asia, movement becomes even more significant. Nomadic groups, always in motion, now play a more active role in shaping the balance between settled regions. Their presence brings both connection and challenge, yet always as part of the natural flow of this vast and interconnected world. They move like the wind, unseen at times, yet deeply influential. As these conflicts and movements unfold, something deeper begins to take shape across Asia, a growing awareness of scale, the realization that events in one region can gently influence another, that the world, though vast, is slowly becoming more connected. And even as borders shift and leadership changes, the rhythm of daily life remains calm and familiar for most. The morning light still rises over fields and villages. The sound of quiet work continues. The sense of community holds steady. There is no lasting disturbance, only change that settles into new forms of balance. As you relax further, imagine standing at the edge of one of these distant moments. You do not see chaos. You do not hear loud conflict. Instead, you sense movement. Distant, soft, almost like a story being told far away. The land remains peaceful. The people continue their lives. And time, as always, moves forward gently. These early conflicts, though quiet in their telling, begin to shape the direction of entire regions, guiding the rise of new powers and slowly preparing Asia for a period where its influence will begin to extend beyond its own vast borders. But for now, the calm remains. The journey continues, and the story flows onward into an age of expansion, where Asia, in its many forms, will begin to reach outward, connecting with lands beyond its familiar horizons as the steady rhythm of history continues to unfold. The lands of Asia begin to experience a quiet outward movement, a gentle reaching beyond familiar horizons as connections slowly extend across distant regions. This is an age not of sudden expansion, but of gradual discovery, where the edges of known worlds begin to stretch and pathways between lands become more clearly defined. Across the vast continent, trade routes that once served nearby regions now begin to grow longer, linking distant kingdoms and empires in a soft and continuous exchange. These roads are not hurried roads, but slow-moving threads, winding through deserts, across mountains, and along open plains. Caravans travel patiently, carrying silk, spices, metals, and crafted goods, but also something far more subtle: ideas, stories, ways of life. As these exchanges deepen, Asia begins to feel less like a collection of separate regions and more like a connected world, gently woven together through movement and shared experience. In East Asia, established dynasties continue to nurture their internal harmony, yet they also begin to engage more with lands beyond their borders. Goods and knowledge move outward, while influences from distant regions quietly find their way inward, shaping culture in soft and lasting ways. In the Indian subcontinent, kingdoms that had long developed rich traditions now become important centers within these expanding networks. Ports along the coast welcome travelers from afar, ships moving slowly across calm waters, guided by stars and seasonal winds. These journeys are not rushed. They unfold with patience, with trust in the natural rhythms of the world. Further west, the Middle East becomes a gentle crossroads, a place where paths from different directions meet and continue onward. Here, ideas from east and west blend quietly, forming a space of learning, exchange, and shared understanding. Cities grow not in noise, but in depth, becoming places where knowledge is preserved, translated, and passed along. Across Central Asia, the role of movement becomes even more essential. The open lands, long home to nomadic communities, now serve as bridges between distant civilizations. These travelers guide caravans, share knowledge of routes, and connect regions that might otherwise remain separate. Their presence brings continuity to this expanding world, a quiet assurance that even the longest journeys can find their way. As Asia reaches outward, its influence begins to extend beyond its own vast lands, not through force, but through connection. Cultures are shared, beliefs are carried across distances, technologies and ideas find new homes in unfamiliar places. And yet, despite this growing reach, the pace remains slow, steady, deeply aligned with the natural flow of time. Nothing feels rushed, nothing feels overwhelming, only a gentle widening of the world. As you drift deeper into calm, imagine yourself traveling along one of these ancient routes. The journey is long, but peaceful. The air is still. The path stretches quietly ahead. Around you, travelers move with purpose, yet without urgency. Each one part of a larger story unfolding across the land. There is a sense of quiet connection, a feeling that distant places are no longer so distant, that the world in its vastness is slowly becoming more familiar. And as this age of expansion continues, it prepares the way for something even more profound. A period where Asia's influence will grow further still, reaching across oceans and into new lands, shaping the course of global history in ways that are both gentle and enduring. But for now, we remain within this moment of calm expansion, where every step forward is taken slowly, and every connection is formed with quiet intention. As the slow and steady movement of expansion continues, the influence of Asia begins to stretch even further, reaching across wider distances, touching lands that lie beyond its familiar horizons. This is a time of growing connection, where the threads that once linked nearby regions now extend across seas and into distant territories, forming a quiet and ever-expanding web of interaction. Along the coasts of the Indian Ocean, ships begin to move more frequently, guided by the gentle patterns of the winds and the steady rhythm of the tides. These journeys are not hurried or forceful, but patient and deliberate, shaped by knowledge passed down through generations. Ports become places of meeting, where cultures arrive not in conflict, but in exchange. Merchants step onto new shores. Languages blend softly. Ideas find new paths to travel. And with each journey, the reach of Asia extends a little further, not through dominance, but through presence. In the Indian subcontinent, coastal regions become vibrant centers of this expanding world. Traders from distant lands arrive with goods and stories, and in return, they carry away the rich traditions and knowledge of the region. This quiet exchange creates a sense of shared space, where different cultures meet and gently influence one another. Further east, maritime routes connect the lands of Southeast Asia, forming networks that stretch between islands, peninsulas, and mainland regions. These connections bring a flow of goods, beliefs, and customs that move as naturally as the water itself. Life here remains calm, guided by the sea, the seasons, and the steady passage of time. In East Asia, established civilizations continue to contribute to this growing influence, sharing innovations, philosophies, and cultural practices that quietly travel across distances. These ideas are not imposed. They are received, adapted, and woven into the lives of others. Across the Middle East, the crossroads of earlier times now becomes even more active. Caravans and ships together create a continuous movement, linking Asia to regions beyond its borders. Knowledge, science, and art are preserved and passed along, creating a lasting legacy that extends far beyond any single place. And in the wide spaces of Central Asia, movement continues to connect land-based routes with coastal pathways, ensuring that even the most distant regions remain part of this unfolding story. As this period of influence grows, something deeper begins to take shape, a sense of shared world, a quiet understanding that cultures, though different, are connected, that ideas can travel farther than any one person, and that knowledge, once shared, can gently transform distant lands. Yet even as this influence spreads, the tone remains soft. There is no rush, no overwhelming force, only a gradual widening, a peaceful extension of presence across the world. As you relax further, imagine standing at the edge of a quiet harbor. The water moves gently. A ship prepares to leave, its sails catching the soft wind. On the shore, people gather, some arriving, some departing, all part of this slow and continuous exchange. There is a feeling of calm movement, a sense that the world is opening, not quickly, but with patience. And as these connections deepen, they begin to shape life in subtle but lasting ways, setting the stage for a transformation that will touch not only Asia, but the entire world. A transformation that will unfold gradually, bringing changes to how people live, work, and understand their place in time. And so, the story gently moves forward. into an age where these growing connections will give rise to new ways of living, where quiet innovations will begin to reshape daily life, and where the steady rhythm of history will carry Asia into a new chapter of transformation. As the gentle flow of time continues, the vast and interconnected lands of Asia begin to experience a deeper kind of transformation, one that unfolds quietly within the fabric of daily life. This is not a sudden change, not a single moment that shifts everything at once, but rather a gradual unfolding, where new ways of living begin to take shape, slowly, steadily, like the first light of morning spreading across a still horizon. Across different regions, small innovations begin to appear, tools refined with care, methods of production adjusted with patience, and systems of work that begin to shift ever so slightly. These changes do not disturb the calm. They blend into it. In many places, the rhythm of life remains tied to the land. Fields are still planted. Seasons still guide the pace of work. But now, there is a subtle sense that something is evolving beneath the surface. In parts of East Asia, craftsmanship becomes more precise. Techniques are passed down and improved over generations. Workshops grow slightly larger. Communities begin to organize work in new ways, not faster but more efficiently, more thoughtfully. In the Indian subcontinent, centers of activity slowly expand. Trade, learning, and production begin to intertwine. The exchange of knowledge brings new ideas into familiar spaces, and with them, quiet adjustments to how people live and create. Further west, in the Middle East, long-established centers of learning continue to nurture knowledge. But now, this knowledge begins to move more widely, carried across the growing networks that connect different parts of the world. And across Southeast Asia, coastal regions remain alive with movement. Ships arriving and departing, bringing not only goods, but new approaches to life and work that gently settle into local traditions. These changes are not overwhelming. They do not replace the old. Instead, they layer upon it, adding depth, adding variation, adding new possibilities. As this slow transformation continues, communities begin to feel slightly different, not in their essence, but in their structure. Towns grow a little larger. Paths become more defined. Work becomes a little more specialized. And with this, daily life begins to shift, not away from calm, but toward a new kind of rhythm, one that balances tradition with quiet innovation. People adapt naturally, they learn, they adjust, and through this gentle process, the world begins to feel both familiar and new at the same time. There is no rush to change, no urgency, only a steady movement forward. As you drift deeper into relaxation, imagine walking through one of these evolving places, a village that has grown into a small town. The sounds are still soft, the pace still unhurried, but there is a subtle sense of activity, of progress unfolding in its own time. A craftsman works with tools slightly more refined than before. A trader prepares goods for a longer journey. A group of learners gathers quietly, sharing knowledge that has traveled from distant lands. Everything feels connected. Everything feels calm. And yet, everything is slowly changing. This transformation, though gentle, begins to shape the future in profound ways, preparing Asia for the emergence of more defined modern structures, where nations, identities, and systems will begin to take clearer form. But for now, we remain within this peaceful moment of transition, where the old and the new exist together, where change is not something to fear, but something that arrives softly, like a quiet companion walking alongside time itself. And as this calm evolution continues, the story moves gently forward, toward a world where these subtle shifts will begin to form the foundations of modern nations, each one carrying the echoes of the past within its present. As the quiet transformation of daily life continues across the vast lands of Asia, something deeper begins to take shape, a gradual movement toward clearer forms of identity, structure, and belonging. The regions that once existed as flowing kingdoms and empires now begin to settle into more defined shapes, not suddenly, but through a slow and natural process. Like rivers finding their steady paths over time. Across many parts of Asia, the idea of a nation begins to emerge, not as a sharp boundary, but as a shared sense of culture, language, and history. People begin to feel more closely connected to the lands they inhabit, to the traditions they carry, and to the communities that surround them. This shift is quiet, almost unspoken, yet deeply meaningful. In East Asia, long-standing dynasties gradually give way to new forms of organization. Systems of governance begin to adjust, not abandoning the past, but reshaping it to meet the needs of a changing world. The balance between tradition and progress becomes a guiding force, allowing societies to evolve without losing their sense of continuity. Cities grow more structured, communication becomes more organized, and the connection between people and leadership begins to take on new forms. In the Indian subcontinent, the rich and layered history of kingdoms slowly transitions into broader identities. Regions that once operated independently begin to feel the pull of larger unifying ideas, shaped by shared experiences, cultural ties, and the gentle influence of time. The land itself carries memory, and from that memory, new forms begin to rise. Further west, in the Middle East, the blending of cultures and histories continues to shape evolving societies. The legacy of earlier empires remains present, yet it begins to merge with new patterns of governance and identity that reflect the changing nature of the world. Trade routes, once the lifelines of connection, now support more settled and structured systems, helping regions maintain both independence and connection at the same time. Across Southeast Asia, coastal and inland regions continue to grow in quiet harmony, forming identities shaped by both local traditions and long-standing connections to distant lands. The sea remains a gentle bridge, linking communities while allowing each to develop its own unique character. And throughout Central Asia, the open landscapes continue to hold their sense of movement. Yet even here, subtle shifts begin to bring more defined forms of settlement and identity, blending the old ways with new structures. As these changes unfold, the world of Asia begins to feel more clearly shaped, not divided, but defined. Nations begin to take form, not through sudden creation, but through a slow gathering of history, culture, and shared experience. And even as these identities grow stronger, the rhythm of life remains calm. People continue their daily routines, communities remain grounded in tradition, and the passage of time continues to guide everything forward, gently, steadily, without urgency. As you relax further, imagine standing at the edge of one of these emerging worlds, a city that reflects both its past and its future. Ancient structures stand beside newer ones. Old traditions continue, even as new ideas quietly take root. There is no conflict between them, only coexistence, only balance. only the feeling that time itself is weaving together different moments into a single, continuous story. And as this story moves forward, the stage is set for a period where these newly forming nations will face challenges that reach beyond their own borders. Moments that will connect Asia to global events in deeper ways, shaping not only the continent, but the world itself. Yet even in these coming times, the calm remains. The pace remains steady, and the story continues, gently flowing toward its next chapter. As the story of Asia continues its slow and steady journey, the newly forming nations begin to experience moments that connect them more deeply to the wider world. Events that unfold across great distances, yet still carry the same gentle rhythm of time. These are periods of global conflict, times when many regions, near and far, become part of shared moments in history. And yet, even within these larger events, life across Asia does not lose its sense of calm continuity. The changes come gradually, the effects spread slowly, and the deeper essence of daily life remains grounded. Across East Asia, societies that had been quietly evolving now find themselves connected to broader global movements. These connections bring new challenges, but also new understandings. Nations begin to adjust, not in haste, but with careful steps, balancing tradition with the need to respond to a changing world. Cities continue to function, communities remain steady, and even as distant events unfold, the rhythm of everyday life carries on, calm and unbroken. In the Indian subcontinent, the growing sense of identity deepens during these times. The experiences of connection with the wider world bring reflection, a quiet awareness of place and purpose within a larger global story. Transitions begin to take shape, not suddenly, but through a gradual unfolding, guided by both history and hope. Further west, in the Middle East, the blending of cultures and histories meets the influence of global events. Regions that had long served as crossroads now feel the presence of wider changes, yet they continue to adapt with resilience and quiet strength. The past remains present, the future approaches gently, and life moves forward between the two. Across Southeast Asia, coastal regions that had long been connected through trade and exchange now experience new forms of interaction with distant parts of the world. These moments bring subtle shifts, changes that are felt over time rather than all at once. Communities adjust, traditions remain, and the balance between continuity and change is carefully maintained. Even in Central Asia, where the open lands have always carried a sense of movement, the influence of global events is felt in quiet ways, shaping connections, guiding transitions, and slowly influencing the path forward. Through all of this, something becomes clear, that even in times of large and far-reaching events, the essence of life does not disappear. It remains steady, calm, present. As you drift deeper into relaxation, imagine observing this time from a peaceful distance. You do not see chaos. You do not feel urgency. Instead, you sense a quiet movement, a series of changes unfolding slowly across the land. Nations adjusting, people continuing, time flowing as it always has. The world feels connected, not through noise but through shared experience. And as these periods pass, they leave behind gentle shifts, new understandings, new directions that guide Asia toward a more unified and reflective state. The lands, once shaped by kingdoms and empires, and later by emerging nations, now begin to move toward a sense of rebuilding, of quiet healing, and of finding balance once more. And so, the story continues, gently guiding us into a time where Asia begins to come together in new ways, where unity, cooperation, and reflection shape the next phase of its long and peaceful journey. As the quiet echoes of global conflicts begin to fade into the distance, the lands of Asia enter a period of gentle rebuilding, a time not of urgency, but of reflection, where nations, communities, and individuals slowly begin to restore balance and rediscover a sense of calm continuity. There is no sudden return to normal. Instead, there is a gradual settling, like the stillness that follows after a long and distant storm. Across East Asia, societies begin to rebuild with care and patience. Cities that have seen change now grow once more, not in haste, but with intention. Systems are refined, connections are strengthened, and a quiet focus on stability begins to guide the path forward. Tradition remains present, but now it is gently woven together with new perspectives, creating a sense of balance between what has been and what is becoming. In the Indian subcontinent, the journey toward identity and independence finds a more defined shape. The sense of belonging that had slowly formed over time now becomes clearer, not through force but through shared understanding. Communities come together, voices align, and from this quiet unity, new paths begin to emerge, leading toward a future shaped by both memory and hope. Further west, in the Middle East, the long history of connection and exchange continues to influence the present. Nations adjust to new realities, yet they do so with a deep awareness of their past, allowing tradition and change to coexist in a calm and steady way. Life continues, the rhythm returns, and the sense of place remains strong. Across Southeast Asia, the gentle balance between local traditions and global connections begins to deepen. Coastal regions once again welcome movement, not as disruption, but as opportunity, allowing cultures to reconnect and grow together in peaceful ways. The sea, as always, remains a quiet bridge, a path that links without dividing. And throughout Central Asia, the vast open lands continue to carry their timeless sense of space and movement. Yet even here, there is a subtle shift, a growing sense of connection to the wider world, as old patterns blend softly with new forms of life. As this period unfolds, something meaningful begins to take shape across the continent, a sense of unity, not in sameness, but in shared experience. Nations remain unique, each carrying its own history, language, and traditions. Yet there is a quiet understanding that they are part of something larger, a connected world, a shared journey. The idea of cooperation begins to grow, slowly, gently, as regions seek peaceful ways to move forward together. Agreements are formed, relationships are nurtured, and a sense of balance begins to return. There is no rush, no sudden transformation, only a steady movement toward harmony. As you relax even further, imagine standing in this near-modern world. The air feels calm, the land feels settled. Around you, signs of both past and present exist side by side. Ancient structures still stand, carrying the memory of centuries. Modern life moves quietly around them, not replacing, but continuing the story. There is a sense of peace in this coexistence, a feeling that time has not erased what came before, but has gently carried it forward. And as this calm period of rebuilding continues, the story approaches its final chapter, one that reflects on the long journey of Asia, from its earliest beginnings to the present moment, a journey shaped not by sudden change, but by the quiet and steady passage of time. And now, as the journey gently draws to a close, we find ourselves in the present moment, standing quietly within the vast and ever-evolving story of Asia, a story that began so softly, with scattered communities beside rivers, with small fires under open skies, with lives shaped by nature and time, and over countless centuries, through slow transformations, rising kingdoms, expanding empires, quiet struggles, and gentle rebuilding. That story has continued to unfold, never in haste, never in noise, but always with a steady and patient rhythm. Asia today is not just a place, it is a living memory, a reflection of everything that has come before. Across its wide and diverse lands, the echoes of ancient worlds still remain, not as distant relics, but as quiet companions to the present. Languages carry the sounds of the past, traditions hold the wisdom of generations, and the land itself remembers every step of its long journey. In the great cities, where modern life moves with quiet purpose, there are still traces of ancient paths beneath the surface. Old and new exist together, not in conflict, but in balance, like layers of time resting gently upon one another. And in the rural landscapes, where the rhythm of life remains closer to the earth, there is a sense that time has never truly left, only continued, flowing softly from one generation to the next. The mountains still stand as they always have, silent and enduring. The rivers still move, carrying stories through valleys and plains. The winds still pass across deserts and fields, whispering of everything they have seen. And within all of this, people continue their lives, much as they always have. They wake with the morning light. They move through their days with quiet intention. They gather, they share, they remember, and they carry forward the story, not as something finished, but as something still gently unfolding. As you rest here at the end of this long and peaceful journey, you can feel the calm continuity of time, the understanding that everything, past and present, is part of one flowing story. There is no sharp ending, no final moment, only a quiet continuation. Asia, in all its depth and diversity, remains a place of gentle movement, where history does not fade, but softly lives on, shaping each new day with the presence of everything that came before. And as your thoughts begin to slow even further, and your mind drifts into a deeper sense of rest, you can let this story settle around you, like a calm and endless landscape, peaceful, steady, and ever-present. There is nothing more to follow, nothing more to hold, only the quiet comfort of knowing that this long journey, from the earliest beginnings to the present day, has unfolded gently, just as time itself was meant to move. And now, you can simply rest.